city government or the state government or the nonprofits or whoever. So there's a lot of players, and it may be that the city figures out a way to encourage home ownership in some way, shape, or form. But to mandate it is almost impossible.
Steve, you had your hand up first.
Just quickly. Back to number 4. I just noticed, if you read that sentence, discourage multifamily development, 2+ units within established, stable, single-family neighborhoods. Now, why would you do that in one place and not another? That's what you're saying. I take that as that the development of the multifamily development is a negative thing, which it is. And you are saying that you want to discourage them within established single-family neighborhoods, which I think is great, but it should. I think that should be, expanded. It should be into other neighborhoods as well. Why just the single-family neighborhood?
Two different things.
So you're
the
saying
one you just mentioned means exactly what it says. Discourage multifamily development into single-family neighborhoods. Entirely two different kinds of neighborhoods. The other one, I think, applies strictly, as we said, to the character and the look of the house. It also says consider, because it's kind of a answer. It could go either way if somebody wanted to do it.
Well, what I'm asking is why say discourage multifamily development in a single-family neighborhood versus another type of residential neighborhood?
So you're basically saying no more multifamily.
You're saying don't have.
Well, I'm saying that's something to be considered because, again, we've already. It's right here in black and white. We've already got more, obviously, than we need. We've got more than the state average. We've got much more than our surrounding neighbors. So my point is I'm not saying you ban multifamily homes, but certainly. I'm sorry?
That's what you said.
That's not
I don't know
what I
how
said.
you get there without doing that.
Well, it doesn't say to ban them. It's what the language is: discourage multifamily development within stable single-family neighborhoods. And what I'm saying is, why not discourage multifamily development in other type of neighborhoods also? Is what I'm saying.
Because you would have a hard time when it's allowed in a multifamily neighborhood discouraging it with a reasonable reason.
I'm not so sure about that, but
I can't. We can't say that if you bring this house here, well, I'll tell you what automatically is going to happen. Therefore, you can't have the house. We can't go that route.
Well, I'll give you. Well, okay, I think you can. I'll give you an example.
Yes.
We're not going to be able to get through that. If we debate every single point with everybody in the audience, we're not going to get it. It's not this plan.
I know.
Well, excuse me, I'm a taxpayer. It is my plan.
And there'll be a public meeting where you get an opportunity to
Okay, and I'm just trying to understand the language here.
Then listen to the discussion and
Excuse me,
take
Mr. Chairman.
the opportunity.
Excuse me.
Public meeting.
I'm addressing the chairman. I'm not addressing you, sir.
Right.
And I'm not going to be. I'm a taxpayer, and I'm not going to be sit here and told that I can and cannot speak.
It's a public meeting. It's
Okay.
not a public hearing, sir.
Excuse me. Are you the chairman or not?
Normally, it's up to us.
I'm not trying to be argumentative.
No, I know.
I understand, sir, but you're the chairman of the planning commission, and this gentleman is out of order.
I know.
I have the floor, and he's out of order.
Okay, so basically, what we normally do is, with our meetings, we allow the public to listen. And it's up to me to say, okay, if you have a comment, say it. But like he was saying, if we don't continue with this, we'll never get through this tonight. And there will be a public hearing on this. All right? So,
I understand what you're saying. I was just trying to understand, and I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. I do.
Okay.
I just, I appreciate that. But
Okay.
I just don't feel, because I've been to meetings like this before,
Yep.
and I believe it is your job to
Right.
say, hey, Mr. Cohen, okay, we've heard enough of you,
Okay.
not other people in the room.
Okay.
Thank you.
Don't take it personally.
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not. I don't take anything personal.
Okay, good. Marie?
No, I was just saying we're going to wrap it up and move
Okay.
it on. Because
Okay.
we haven't really even discussed this as a commission, number 8, or anything else. We've heard the explanation.
Okay.
We've heard some other opinions. So move on.
So we'll move on right now. Can we just move on this? Like I said, we've been on this page now for about 25
If
minutes.
I might.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, it's the commission's meeting.
Okay.
You as chairman decide who gets to speak.
Okay.
It is a public meeting.
Right.
The public, at the very least, is entitled to attend and observe.
Okay.
To the extent that you want to invite public comment and
Mhm.
discussion, that's entirely up to you.
Okay.
But having said that, it's the commission's meeting, it's the commission's workshop.
Okay.
The public is entitled to observe, and if you feel that the public should be allowed to speak, that's up to you. But
Okay.
you got to
I understand.
get through
I
this.
understand. We got to get through it. All right, real quick.
Glenn, excuse me, Glenn?
Yep.
Yeah. Promoting owner occupancy of housing basically means the neighborhood, and then by extension the city at large, has a stake in the city and maintaining property and ensuring that everything is in working order and that we can have a vibrant city with greater little blight and so on and so forth. So the spirit of owner occupancy, I understand. I like it. On the other hand, I'm just making an observation. We have an ancillary contradictory thing going on here. We have a ballot initiative to change the city charter, whereby the chief of police and the fire chief, excuse me, Bill.
I know.
Fire chief.
I want to stop it. I want to stop it because we're not going to get through with this. All right,
Okay.
so no more comments, okay?
This is just contradictory to that.
Okay.
That's
Go ahead.
So the only comment I have right now on page 6 is the comment on number 8 was to modify that sentence. I wasn't sure I had consensus from the commission that that was an okay change to make.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Anything else on page 6? I think on page 7, the goal is repeat of the goal in the 2000 Plan of Conservation Development, modified slightly, and the goal is to encourage the provision of attractive, safe, and sanitary housing to meet the social and economic needs of the city's current and future population. So a number of these strategies here are carryovers from the 2000 POCD related to the housing needs of different segments of the population. Thoughts on these?
Glenn, are there any, looking at the current plan, are there any policies, existing policies that were proposed to be taken out? I know when the commission went over this, again, before you got on board, that the policy about large single-family lots that
Yeah, I had seen that note.
had been removed. It's not to say that people can't get single-family lots, but it was, I think the commission felt that was a policy that seemed to kind of outlive its usefulness.
Yeah, I saw those notes from that work
Okay.
on the commission, which is why that didn't continue, but I didn't maintain, I didn't keep full revisions, markings, if you will, to show that that had been deleted.
How would you consider, now when you say starter housing, number 16,
Yep.
are you talking price-wise, more so than square footage-wise?
Well, I think some communities adopted programs to help people to get to their down payment, if you will, to get into the city and encourage owner occupancy. And in exchange for that, instead of somebody having to pay PMI, the issue has become sort of a second lien, which the city has on the house. And then once the house is, or if the house is sold, it's paid off, or it's paid off within a certain time frame. So we can promote homeowner occupancy and get people into the city and to support the overall housing market with these types of programs. So that's, again, thinking of the verb chart, the verb consider was, that could be a controversial discussion because it's the expenditure of public funds, if you will, but it does have a public benefit, et cetera.
Thanks.
There might also be an opportunity, I'm not saying she has the plan, but opportunities with a rent, with the option to buy, those kind of policies could be, within a year or 2 years of a renter leasing a property, they could have an option to purchase the property. Just an option, just an idea.
I'll talk about 13 with you for a moment. And, I propose later on here in the discussion a possible section for the plan about institutional development. And I think there's institutions in the city which benefit the city, and there's other institutions or institutional facilities which actually can have some impacts to quality of life, etc. So I just want to make sure that in 13 you're comfortable with the language, or if there's any changes we should make, because those may carry through to the institutional development section. Is the Commission comfortable with 13?
Your current plan, and I have a vague recollection that this was part of your housing discussion earlier on. But the current policy is to encourage housing options such as group homes, emergency shelters, transitional housing, and single-room occupancy hotels for those individuals with special housing needs. My recollection was even back that the phrase "with special housing needs" was really applicable to all of the items in that list. That it wasn't, and recognize that group homes can be controversial, and SROs can certainly be controversial. I think all of these kinds of facilities can be controversial. I think the city has been pretty open in the past about allowing and encouraging under certain circumstances group homes. The state of Connecticut in fact has state laws in place that limit any community's ability to limit group homes up to a certain size. Again, I think the city's been pretty open about emergency shelters and certain kinds of transitional housing. So I guess the question is this viewed as, it's kind of like the three bears. Is this too little? Is this too much? Or is it just right?
I have a question on wording.
Yep.
It ends with "for those individuals with special housing needs." Does that just apply to the hotels, or does that cover everything in the list?
See, I believe that the way this was written in 2000, that phrase referred to all of those uses.
That's not what it says.
Right.
Yeah, it's not. And Alan's got the history, if you will, on this, and I would suggest if that's the Commission's intention, that I would propose that the Commission split what is now 13 up into two separate thoughts. And so the first one would be the first two bullets, that those go together. And then we add, make a new bullet here and start off the sentence which says, "For those individuals with special housing needs, comma, strive to encourage the provision of group homes, emergency," and make it clear that we're...
Take the word hotel out.
Single-room occupancy hotels. You want that out.
The word hotel. I mean, hotel, you think of it as a hotel.
Well, but
Single-room occupancy hotel is just that.
That's what it is.
So why wouldn't that also fall into transitional housing?
We certainly could. Well, again, that's why we're looking at language from 15 years ago.
Yep.
And again, my recollection, and I know it's been a long time, was that the Commission recognized that there are people who, for whatever reason, have special housing needs, and that there needs to be an effort made. Again, I think the city has done that in the past to accommodate those folks. Be they, well, it runs a whole gamut, and But I do think that terminology, special housing needs, people with special housing needs, was intended to modify all of those those kinds of uses like group homes and the like.
So if the Commission is comfortable with this, the only thing I'm still not clear on is the single-room occupancy hotels, but I might suggest for your consideration, for those individuals with special housing needs, comma, consider ways to accommodate group homes, emergency shelters, transitional housing, and then the issue of single-room occupancy. In or out?
place to do that anymore. In
Yeah,
There was a PS.
Yeah, I don't, particularly in a big city.
Much larger cities than Bristol.
I think group homes, emergency shelters, and transitional housing covers that.
Yep.
I mean, if there's some other kind of housing that isn't really covered by
So you gotta have any kind of catch-all, for example.
well, yeah, there may be some kind
That
of...
could allow for
I think transitional housing
something that
is
tomorrow might
can
not
be
be
an
in here
umbrella
because
type
they just
for-
created something else or something.
I don't think there's any civil rights or other issues that we're grappling with here. So I think we're okay. Anything else on page 7? So on page 8, there were some recommendations from the current plan of conservation and development that related to specific neighborhoods and places. So, and so this relates on page 8, for example, to number 19. And so if the commission wanted to continue these programs, policies, or recommendations, you should tell me, and I can get it into the plan. And if some of these Al and I had a chance to talk about, we think these might have passed. At least one of them has, we know. So the commission's thoughts here on these particular ones.
And again, just as a preface to this, as Glenn notes here on page 8, these came from the 2000 plan, but in the future land use chapter. So when you establish the future land use plan, recognizing that's kind of a macro picture of the city, that there were some very more specific areas that this commission sort of zoomed in on, if you will, and identified, for example, certain segments of the Route 6 corridor, certain segments of Route 229 that you had concern about and that you felt should be highlighted, and that a land use policy should be, or a future land use policy should be more better identified, if you will. So that's what 19 through 24 on page 8 refer to.
So,
Are you still concerned about that?
I think 22.
Well, do you want to start at the...
yeah, I mean, I think if I could direct your attention to this handout, these numbers 19 through 24 are now here with aerial photographs, so you can actually sort of see the neighborhood. So the first one is, again, talks about maintaining the single-family character along the east side of 229 between Lake Avenue and the parcel north of Superior Electric. So I guess the question, in a sense, for the commission is agree, disagree, continue that policy, consider options.
I say agree. Commissioners?
Do we need it?
Need the policy?
Yeah.
Well, again, I think the...
I mean 19, yeah.
Well, again, I think the idea was that in 2000 was that there were areas of potential concern by the commission that these, depending on what happened in zoning, what direction these would go in. So, for example, in item 19, item 1 on the drawing, this is the area, as Glenn indicated, south of Lake Avenue. It's across the street from Stock's Playground, and it's across from an area that's not single-family residential, but this side of the street has some single-family residences. There may be an office or two there, but it's mostly small houses, single-family residences. And once you get north of this, you're, again, you're into, I said Stock's Playground. I mean Stock's.
I know the one.
Casey, thank you. Stock's is farther north. But you get farther north, you're starting to get towards the intersection with Mont Road, and you've got the former Callan School, and so there's sort of this island or this oasis, if you will, of small single-family homes in this stretch of road. And I think the commission's concern back in 2000 was that really needs to maintain a residential character, and rather than have it simply all become more commercial, that I think the commission wanted to, as much as possible, try to maintain that character. I think that's what a lot of these are about. So So I guess the question is that, do you still want to do that? Because that area hasn't really changed very much. I mean, you do have the beginnings of Business Park Drive at the very southern end of that.
I think there's a good, Alan points out, a good situation here where without this language in the plan, the developer might be inclined to submit a zone, try to acquire a piece of property, submit a zone change application. With this language in the plan, when it gets referred to the Planning Commission for comment on the zone change, you would comment that that's not consistent, which puts the zoning commission to a 2/3 vote. So this is going to have a meaningful impact here, and I think this does get back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier with the integrity of the residential neighborhood. And I think that continuing this strategy in this particular situation would help protect the neighborhood in the back in terms of Woodmere and Bayberry. Continue?
Yes.
Okay. How about number 2? This is Route 6 between Britton Road and Stafford Avenue. So the south, excuse me, this will turn it around. So the north side of Route 6 in that location contains some offices, there's a gas station at the corner of Stafford, but the south side of the road, the other side as you're looking at it, are residential houses.
And again, you have a similar situation. The north side of the street is largely commercial. The south side, not very deep, single-family homes in this area. Now, this is going to be an area where the state's going to do some widening. I don't know. I believe they're going to try to do as much as possible within the existing right-of-way.
You know, I know that I'm in the minority here, but on the first issue, on number 1 and this number 2, I just want to go on record as saying I don't think it's a good idea to maintain single-family residential character in those areas. We should strive at all costs to allow the free market to dictate what goes there and if they're commercial use. Because I know that especially the Middle Street area, I can't imagine anyone wanting to build a single-family residential on that particular road unless you like high traffic, lots of noise.
They're there now.
They already exist.
I realize they already exist, but this restricts any future development or any changes by saying it has to maintain the single-family residential character. And again, I understand that I'm a minority here, but I just want to go on record because I don't think that that's
I understand
a
your
good
point.
idea.
One challenge, though, is that all of us have lived in houses along that street, and I don't know why I'm picking on Jody, but Jody decides to sell, and somebody proposes a commercial use on there, then the 2 neighbors are affected. And then somebody else sells. And so what happens is that the value of the properties are affected as things like that happen. So sometimes the only way to preserve the integrity and stability of the neighborhood is to actually say, hang on a second here. We're not going to go the free market route in this location. There's other locations along 229 or along Route 6 where maybe we would, but the question is if there were no houses there today, then look, it's a commercial corridor. So I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying that the other point of view is there's people who live there today, and how might we protect them and the neighborhoods around them? What is the right call to make? And in my own view, for your consideration, the shallowness of the lots means it makes it very difficult to put an effective buffer in between commercial and residential. And for your consideration, that might be a consideration in terms of maintaining the residential integrity for now, and see sort of what happens. These are the tough situations that end up as special.
I completely understand your position. I understand the point that you're making. But again, I firmly believe that developing commercial and building our tax base, not residential, because residential, as we know, isn't exactly growing in the city. I think allowing the free market to dictate what goes in there as an option. And again, this restricts it to only single-family residential.
No, well, it doesn't.
Well,
it says.
Okay.
It says single-family residential character. And you're right. You say, well, that means single-family houses. But I can tell you that the zoning commission, and I think this commission may have seen it, there have been instances where on the fringes of these kinds of areas, the zoning regulations allow non-residential uses at a scale, at a size and a scale that maintains a residential character, so that a physician building a small, taking one of the houses and converting, well, for example, on Route 229, where Columbia Dental now is,
Right.
okay?
Right.
That was a single-family home. But the zoning commission, and that's evolved over time, that's of a size and a scale that's consistent with the residential character elsewhere along that street and behind the street. And so it's not limiting, I understand what you're saying.
And I understand what you're saying.
It's not limiting just a single-family home.
Okay,
Right.
I understand that, but all that I'm saying is that these particular parcels are not very desirable for new residential construction.
But you're not going to get new residents, they're already occupied. They're already built on. These are lots that already have houses on them.
But these existing lots and houses might go for a dental office, a doctor's office,
Right, they could.
a real estate office.
Yep. Yeah, they could.
They can now.
They can now.
They can
They
now?
can now.
Sure.
Then I'm done. Thank you.
And that would be consistent with the resident, again, that small scale.
I concede.
Oh, I wouldn't make, no, but I understand the point.
I think this is a nuance again, where I think the wording could be improved here, because I think what we're saying is maintain the character in these areas to appear single-family residential. So we're not saying that the uses can't happen. What we're saying is that we have to maintain that. We don't want sort of larger character buildings. So if it's all right with you,
Yeah, that may be a good way
if
to
you'd
do it.
allow me to reword those sentences, I think I can accomplish what everybody said here today.
You have a similar issue with the next one.
Yes,
On Route 6.
Yep. And I think it's the
In
same
Spotty
spot.
Places.
I agree.
Yeah, and it may be that when it's a single-family residential character, it's like, well, it means single-family houses, and I don't think that's the intention.
Okay.
Well,
But again, I misunderstood, when I
No,
read
no,
it, I misunderstood
But your
what it was saying.
But your misunderstanding leads to us writing it more clearly, so there is not that, so it's clear to everybody what the intention is.
Yep.
It was clear 15 years ago, but it may be less than
Well, I think that probably carries over to the top of the next page too, because I think we're saying the same thing. We're not saying that the uses have to be, we're just saying that the development character and
Right.
flavor has to be. Top of the next, sorry, top of the first page. It was in the same sentence.
So number 20.
Yeah, yeah, yes. So I think the wording would say something like maintain the character.
Scale.
Character, well, let me finish it. So for example, maintain the character of the area between Lewis Street, Oakland Street, and Mercier Avenue to have a single-family residential flavor. Or scale. Trying to avoid using character as
We'll
two
fix
times.
it. We'll fix it.
Yeah. So I think, depending on which page you got, I guess looking at page, the blue box. So I think that would take care of 19, 20. And 21's. So the first one's talked about single-family residential character, and this one just says residential character. Is there a reason why?
Probably not.
Just something to...
Because he wasn't there back in 2000. But but that may give you the.
But it's the same.
Do you want to continue the same wording? Yep.
And again, I think in this instance with number 21, between Broad Street and Route 6, it's not strictly single-family residential.
Right.
But it is predominantly residential. I think that was the difference. But that may be, again, that terminology may be what you want to carry through on the others.
Yeah, because then the question will come up, well, what's the difference? Why do you do it?
Right. And again, that's an area where there is a mix.
Yep.
There may be one or two actual businesses there, but it's mostly residential.
And again, we're talking about the character of these areas.
Right. Even the churches and offices that are there tend to be residential scale.
Yep. So number 22 is also number 4 here, and Alan, this is...
Take that one right out.
Take it out.
All right, we
For those of you who don't know,
right, we discovered that.
it's currently... yes.
Group home, adult.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
3. So I wasn't... There's 2 multifamily developments here on this one, Alan.
Okay.
So we talked about, was it from here to here, or from here to here?
The one that was in between Cross Street and Northern to the south, a lot of that's okay. All right, I gotta try to get my orientation.
No, just a block. Come on down to the right.
I gotta turn this stuff.
East side, Lake Avenue,
I think that's already been done.
between Cross.
You have a
That's the
cemetery on...
transfer station,
You have a right, you got a cemetery on the corner.
Mhm.
You got right, you have a cemetery on Cross Street.
Right.
Looks to me like you got residential.
And then you have
multi,
residential,
single,
that's,
multi.
the residential development shows up near the top of this yellow box is Blue Trail Crossing, Kevin Delvanca's development.
Mhm.
And then second.
And I believe that, and you've got apartments that are being, elderly apartments that are being developed on the Seal property on that site. So this may be moot.
Well, I'm looking right here, and it seems to me it's showing single, multi, single, multi, single, multi.
Have to look.
Okay, so we're going to check this one for you. So I think that the concept here, I think, is a good one. What it's suggesting is that we have industrial uses to the rear, we have a residential street on Lake Avenue, so using multifamily as a gentle transition between those two is not a bad land use philosophy. But we're just going to check to make sure, because my small version of zoning now seems to show that there's still a mishmash of zoning in that area. Okay. This is the number 24, which is the other side of the street here. Which says maintain the single-family zoning on that side.
I think the commission's concern at the time was that multifamily residential development, if it was on the east side of the street, was going to show up on the, or requests were going to be made onto the west side of the street, and I think the concern there was, as is noted in the policy, that you don't have to go too far west and all of a sudden you're at the base of South Mountain,
Right.
and that the commission didn't want to encourage, that really the only way to get any kind of multifamily development of any magnitude would be to start blasting into the mountain. That's, kind of runs against another policy you have about trying to preserve the South Mountain.
Right.
Okay.
So good on 24.
Done. Okay, so back to the booklet. Now that gets us through the residential section of the plan. Are there any other residential issues or policies that you think that the plan of conservation and development should consider that needs to address? Our goals are the integrity and stability of residential neighborhoods, promoting owner occupancy of housing, and encouraging the provision of attractive, decent, safe, and sanitary housing. Good?
Yeah.
Okay. On to page 10, which is now into business and economic development strategies. Again, overview and key findings are similar to the 2000 plan in terms of stressing that it's going to be in our long-term interest to diversify our local economy, to be resilient in weathering economic cycles. Mentioned ESPN in here. ESPN wasn't mentioned in the 2000 plan in this regard. I've updated some of the market dynamics in terms of the office technology industry and retail services that have been going on overall. Any thoughts or questions, anything here jump out at you?
Question.
Yep.
In your travels, have you talked to Justin now?
Yeah.
Are we in cohesion here, or?
Well, I think that I interviewed Justin as part of my work, research background for the POCD. Our conversations did get into how to diversify the local economy. I included that information plus other information into this. Justin didn't see this report until just the last day or two. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Yeah. So,
I hate to be going in different directions.
no, I agree. I think my thought process in terms of how we could proceed would be for us to have conversations amongst the commission and then to share it with people like Justin and others to get their feedback and comment, share it with the community to get their comments and feedback, and make sure that we've reflected all of that as we move forward. So the first stop was here, and then from there to Justin and others. On the top of page 12, again, number one goal is to maintain and improve the economic base of the city. Identify some of the important goals and objectives and what we want to try to accomplish and who we need to work with and what we're trying to work for. I think the goal is still appropriate.
That's the same goal as you had in 2000.
I think it's still a wonderful goal. Any thoughts on page 12?
Yeah, number 9 is kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. Why do we want to continue this relationship that's failed for the past 5 years? I mean, I understand that when you look at...
Please.
Okay.
And let's put it this way, we stop at 9. If we get done before 9, then we can go back, all right? Because, I think that was more than fair to allow the audience to talk tonight. Because it is a public hearing.
Public meeting.
Public meeting, I'm sorry. Okay.
And I'm just trying to remember some of the other information because I might be, might be a little confused in my head. But anything in this wording conveys to you what's happening or what we're recommending for the Boulevard School of an Economic, the shared office space, the starter incubator. Thank you. I told you my brain was just like a mishmash of stuff, and I didn't know if something should be addressed in that while we're doing it, but as a recommendation for the schools possibly. But there might be other areas in the city that could house and develop that same type of thought for economic development.
Isn't that covered?
Well, that's what I'm asking. You take that is number 9.
Right.
Okay.
I think number 9 is extremely important to have in there. Even if over the last 5 years, the city hasn't been as successful as it may have wanted to be, it doesn't mean it's time to stop and give up. I think that this is probably one of the most important statements for policy that's in this document, is that we continue to try to coordinate. I mean, it says it right there. This is the whole thing about the downtown. We can't stop. We can't give up. Even though the past, again, has been less than ideal, to give up and not have this statement in there is
Okay.
giving up. I think it's a critical statement to have in there.
If I might, Marie, are you suggesting that additional language be added to note as part of ongoing economic development activities, or in terms of trying to diversify the economic base of the city, to mention incubator space?
You can be that specific.
Yeah, I mean, we addressed it with just the school because that's a good thought process, but there could be other areas where it may work just as well, besides the school, next school building. But I didn't know if you needed to get that specific where appropriate for number 9 might be.
That's specific to it.
I mean, that for plan of development to say that we're we want to develop incubator space, that specific thing.
I think
I don't know
that
if that's-
incubator space is a good concept, because I think it's sort of like planting a seed that we hope will blossom for our economy. But I'm not sure I'd get as specific as to say Memorial School or anything else.
No, I didn't want to say the building, but the type of...
But I think if we could encourage, or the city could attain or achieve some type of incubator space, you think back to the marvelous story of ESPN and its humble beginnings. And you say to yourself, there was some way that we could have planted a seed for that and then reaped the benefits, then we should try. So I don't know what that would be or how it would unfold, but I think the concept of being homegrown and incubating is something that could be encouraging in here. So I think it's okay. They're all better than medical barrel.
Did I hear you right?
Well, no, I just muttered that because we're not doing tapes. So.
That struck me, homegrown.
Yes, it is.
I like that too.
Okay, move on.
Glenn, I'm looking at the old plan, page 42, reestablished the downtown as a major component of the city's economic base.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering why, and I guess 9 kind of touches on that, but I was wondering why it was...
There's a whole downtown section. So I don't think I would have deleted that.
Oh, no, I don't think you would have either, but you probably just know it.
Yeah, that's what, I can't tell you exactly.
Okay, fine, that's fine. I'm just comparing document to document.
Yeah, I'm glad you're doing that.
Now, I have a question.
But I can't put my finger on it right now. So
Okay, that's fine.
don't lose that.
Sorry.
All right, go ahead.
Looking back at booklet 4, where you see the different years and going from manufacturing predominantly in 1960 to predominantly services now, do you want to say anything here as to encourage more manufacturing?
That's the next goal on the
Okay,
top of the
sorry.
next page. Now, it's okay, because this is a challenge in a sense for us. Industrial development has been the heart and soul of Bristol since the Industrial Revolution. We were innovative and creative and accomplished before other places were. It's just that the cost basis has changed both in our state and our country, and has become more and more challenging. So we're heavily invested in something that has been outperformed by other areas around the world. So the goal is to still try to promote and manage industrial development. We have the Manufacturers Association of Connecticut that does things to try to promote this, and darn it, we've got the facilities, the buildings, the utilities, we've got everything to support this. So we should continue to promote and manage industrial development, provide spaces for it, zoning for it, and industrial operations. How the market's going to do, I don't know. But I do think it's something that should be continued as a pillar of the city's economic development strategy.
Well, number 11, you say continue to support. What about encourage? Support and encourage.
Encourage and support. I think the reason I put that statement in is because there's industrial operations here that people forget about because of other things that go on. And I wanted to have a statement I thought was important for the city to recognize that we appreciate the businesses that are here and what they do. And I think adding in encourage and support is excellent.
Would it perhaps put too fine a point on it to encourage new industrial operations and support existing industrial operations, or is that getting too fine a point?
I'm going to do two.
That sounds good. And I think it's important, and perhaps this is a nuance, perhaps it's not. This doesn't refer specifically to manufacturing. And I guess one could argue, well, is there a difference between, industry and manufacturing?
Right.
And
Because that's another point. The nature of industrial activity
right.
has changed and changes.
Right.
And sometimes in your mind, you could be thinking of what used to be,
Right.
when in fact we just don't do that anymore. But we do something else. Because it's one of the things
We want
that's
to be
changed.
more specific for manufacturing, especially since some of the trend is companies are bringing manufacturing back.
High-tech manufacturing,
Right.
and we've got the technical school, et cetera. So right now, based on the comments I've heard so far, for your consideration, continue to encourage and support manufacturing and other industrial operations in the city, both existing and new.
Because I see I see industry as being a broader umbrella than manufacturing. I think, when you say manufacturing, people think they're making widgets. But, and this is perhaps not the best example, a brewery is an industrial operation, but you don't think of it as manufacturing. But they are. They're manufacturing beer. But you tend to not think of that as a manufacturer or a distillery. But it's an industrial operation. So I think that, again, it may be a kind of a nuance, but it's perhaps an important one to perhaps think bigger than strictly manufacturing.
If we do
that
something-
manufacturing may be too limiting. If you're referring to industry, that covers manufacturing. That perhaps people tend to think of that a little more broadly, hopefully in a positive way.
Right.
If you make B out of A, that's manufacturing.
Right. But again, I suspect if you mentioned a brewery or a distillery, people don't automatically think of that as manufacturing.
Right.
But I think getting manufacturing...
It's retail.
Well, sure it is.
It's a pleasure industry.
Absolutely. But again, I think you tend to think of people making widgets or making...
Well, making is the key. If you're
Sure.
producing something.
Right. That's why I'm thinking of the term industry is perhaps a little bit broader. And again, it's kind of nuanced more than anything else, but it may be important.
How do you feel about number 12? Because we have the 229 industrial area, but we also have the northwest industrial area as well. So when we say it's Bristol's major industrial area, I mean, that's true, it is, but do we get anything from 12? Is 12 doing anything for us?
Well, I don't know if it does or not. I think one of the concerns about the area in the northwest section of the city, notwithstanding the fact that there's a very large industrial building there, and there are other manufacturers that have moved up to that area in recent years. What has tended to be true in the past, at least, was that the road network. I mean, you're going basically to get out of there if you're not moving goods out by freight line, then you're driving through large residential areas to get out or to get goods in. And I think to some extent that may have, obviously it hasn't stifled activity that's taking place up there, but certainly in the former New Departure building, Clark, Western Steel, they take stuff, I think, both in and out by rail. Firestone is up there. I think they take stuff in and out by rail. I'm sure there are other activities up there that maybe still bringing stuff in by truck, but I think in terms of highway access and the like.
I can assure you that all night long, since I live right on that road,
okay,
that Firestone's trucking their product out constantly. The only thing that's saving me is I can't hear that well anymore. But the windows shake every time one of the semis.
And that may be your answer. And I've had people been in town longer than I've worked here ask me, how did that end up? How did this million-square-foot industrial building end up there? And it's a story that goes back to the 60s. And it's probably one of those things that seemed like a good idea at the time.
Yep.
And now you look at it, 50 years later, and go, maybe it wasn't such a good idea. But it's there to kind of make the best of it. I think the city has made a conscious effort to redirect its industrial, its modern industrial and manufacturing activity down to the southeast.
Yeah, but the smaller facilities like A.G. Russell.
Right.
I would encourage that type of business.
Perfect example of what we were talking about.
Yeah,
Smaller
so I
businesses.
don't know if you'd want to
Well, that kind of-
exclude that.
Oh yeah, I'm not suggesting that you exclude it, but I think, and I don't think the intention would be for the zoning commission to say, well, we're going to just change all the zoning there to something else besides
Right.
industrial.
Agreed.
But I think that as long as that area is up there, it'll continue to develop. But I think my recollection that the intent of this policy was to focus attention on the southeast area, which was viewed, at least 15 years ago, as the primary industrial area, not the exclusive one, but certainly the, well, use the word major.
I think taking it out would be, taking out number 12. I'm not saying that it's the major. Again, whatever happens, you certainly wouldn't want to not promote the northwest industrial areas.
Just talk to me first.
Did you want to promote one more than the other?
I don't.
Because
no,
I think you.
I don't think we should. I don't believe so. I believe the area with what you have up in the.
It'll kind of take care of itself.
Because I think without, if we didn't have this at all,
I'm okay with taking
here.
care of it.
Yeah.
I think it would go with some.
Number
in general,
13
Southwest
is
anyway.
something that I,
Whatever makes sense.
I'm going to talk about number 13 with you for a second. We currently have 3 industrial park districts in town, the IP1, IP3, and IP25. And basically, they allow essentially the same uses. The dimensional standards are different. And you end up saying to yourself, a 25-acre requirement is what the IP25 does, although it allows smaller lots if they're consistent as part of a master plan. But it just seems to me that actually some of those standards, which may have seemed like good ideas at the time, may be holding us back a little bit in terms of some of the things we might be able to encourage in terms of industrial development. So rather than dictate what those should be, what I wrote here as a strategy for your consideration is undertake a review of the rationale and standards for the 3 different zoning districts and decide if those are the policies and strategies we want to carry forward. So that task is probably going to fall to the zoning commission to do that. And if they're comfortable with them, they stay. And if they think there's some changes, then they're supporting the plan for doing that. But it might move us in a positive direction.
You're suggesting making the I-25 smaller, or a little bit more nimble?
Nimbler. But I recognize that that's public water supply watershed, and it's a large lot of residential area. So I think finding the appropriate balance is something that's important. And I think that my point is, review. On the bottom of page 13, the goal is strive to make efficient use of available, I guess, business areas. And the point here is that we've got brownfield sites that if we can repurpose those sites, they'll set us off in a positive direction. We want to try to prohibit business expansion on the residential side streets or prohibit inappropriate uses in different areas. And then also on number 18, the parking standards in Bristol aren't all that bad, but parking is the primary determinant of what we get in terms of business yield. And so my point here is to undertake a review of our parking standards. If the parking standards are holding back a business from getting able to accomplish the square footage it wants on a more economical site, then that's not really a good strategy for us either. So just take a look at those standards as well. Okay? Is that all right on page 13? Page 14. This is the issue that comes back to encouraging appropriate building and site design. We talked about this a little bit in sort of our community character discussion, but the issue is making sure that the businesses that we get fit into the character of the neighborhood and the character of the community. So that's what number 19 is. The other ones are existing policies in terms of signage and gateways. And 23 is a new one, which is this concept of adjusting how we treat non-conforming uses. So this is a policy decision. What happens right now is that if we have a non-conforming use or a non-conforming building in a district, essentially it is limited in terms of what it can do because it's non-conforming. The way zoning treats it is to freeze it in time and hope that it is eliminated over time. If you are the owner of a property in that circumstance, your response is you don't invest in your building because you can't do anything with it. So what happens over time is the building actually deteriorates and you actually get in worse condition. So some communities around the state have played with the idea of allowing non-conforming uses to be improved or expanded, provided that the neighborhood ends up better as a result. So the issue is, yes, you can add on to your building, but you have to install a buffer. Yes, you can add parking for your employees, provided you put up a fence. But they end up in a situation where they encourage property owners to actually sort of maintain and enhance their buildings. So it's a novel concept, and it's here for discussion or debate. You and I haven't had a chance to chat about this, so I don't know whether or not this is something that the community is comfortable with. But it is an issue that's being explored by other communities, and there are some cases where it's worked out quite well.
I can tell you I'm not comfortable with it, based on our experiences with nonconformities.
Would that pertain to like drive-throughs?
No. Well, yeah,
A little bit.
it could. We're talking about maybe not everybody understands what non-conforming uses are, so I think we're going to start from there.
Remember the garage up the street here on West Street? I forget his name at the moment. He's got a garage, repairs and service.
Cameron?
He's got an office, yeah.
Cameron.
Remember he came in for a site plan to improve the office? Yeah, he did.
Is that a while ago?
Oh yeah. But not the main part of the business, the improvement. And non-conforming stopped him from doing that anyway.
Well, that's what I can hear memory better than mine,
Yeah.
that's quite possible.
But I'm thinking that if you can't do anything with whatever the central activity is.
Except that it's not that you can't do anything, and I think that's somewhat of a misconception.
Okay.
Okay. So, but I think we've got to step back and explain what non-conforming uses are, because I presume people say we don't know what non-conforming uses mean. A non-conforming use is a use that, as a result of a change in the zoning regulations, is no longer allowable. Good example, it may be a use that predates the zoning regulations. So, good example is, 50, 60 years ago when a neighborhood was growing up and before zoning, zoning's been in Bristol since 1930, somebody built a neighborhood convenience store, local grocery store. Zoning Commission comes along, adopts zoning regulations and says, this entire area is residential. We're going to zone the whole area single-family residential, including the little grocery store. That little grocery store is grandfathered in. You've heard the term something is grandfathered in. The grocery store is grandfathered in. It predates the regulations, or a change in the regulations. It's a use that's no longer allowed in the zone. It's allowed to remain. It is allowed to continue. It is allowed to change from one non-conforming use to another under certain conditions. In theory, the long-term goal is for it to disappear. But I think probably Glenn and I can probably cite in probably every community in the United States non-conforming uses that have been there probably longer than any other use.
Longer than zoning.
Longer than zoning.